Welcome to Insurance Technology Amplified, the podcast where we explore how innovation is transforming the insurance industry. This is the place where technology and expertise come together to empower agents, carriers, and the industry alike. Thank you for tuning in. Now, let's get to the show.
Philippe, welcome to our Amplified podcast. We're excited to have you. We've got Peter here, we've got Adam Kiefer here, and we always start these, and I don't know if we're talking to the ether. I don't know who's listening. I like to flatter myself and think that someone's going to be listening to this, and I hope so. And we're really excited to have you. You and I have been working together for a long time, and there are a bunch of people, but not too many, who I really consider a friend in the industry, and somebody who I hope that years after I'm out of the insurance industry that I stay in touch with. And we're really excited and happy to have you join us.
Absolutely, thank you, and I'm happy to be amplified, as they say, and to talk to you guys. You guys are really cool people. So, and same, Michael.
Yes. So, for those of the people who are listening who don't know, usually, there's a scripted intro to who our guest is, and because of the shit show that the AV technical things that took us 18 minutes to get figured out. I don't have it pulled up. Philippe, could you just tell the two members listening who you are, what you do, what's the thesis of SEMSEE, and what do you bring to the insurance value chain?
Well, thank you, and thank you again, Michael, Adam, and Peter for having me on. So, I'm just a kid from New York. Who happened to join the insurance industry about 8 years ago. Before the insurance industry, I did spend about 20 plus years in B2B or B2B2C kind of industries, building technology for agents, whether that be in the real estate space, the travel space, and even in the publishing space. And when this opportunity to work with D.E. Shaw, Nafila, and now S1 Advisors to build SEMSEE almost 8 years ago came, it felt like a natural progression for me, partly because the industry is so complicated, and I love complicated industries with lots of data, lots of really smart people, but real problems that technology can help with, right? But technology not to help get rid of people, technology not to disintermediate, but technology to enable. And that ultimately is what we are building at SEMSEE. We've built a platform focused on commercial insurance, and what our job and what our platform's role is to help agents and carriers connect. What that means is we want agents to be able to place as many of the risks that come to their desks to the right carriers, and we want carriers to be able to leverage our platform to get to the risks they want and that they can serve, and remove as much of that inefficiency in that transaction as possible. And that can take place in many different ways, but ultimately that's our goal. We want to help facilitate through our platform the connectivity between a carrier and an agent as they are trying to help small businesses in the U.S., which is the lifeblood of our country, be insured.
Can I ask you a question?
Absolutely.
Do you laugh when you get on the phone with some newbie who just sold their tech company for $30 million and they know digital and they know AI, and they're like, I'm going to come conquer the insurance industry? Like I have those conversations, like, I don't know, once a month, like, and I laugh. Like, do you have those? Like, well, what do you have to say? Like, having, almost if you went back and you spoke to yourself 10 years ago when you entered this industry, what would you say to yourself, or, to those types of people?
Interesting. So, I do laugh. I certainly laugh, if not outside, but certainly on the inside for many of these. And part of why I like this industry is there are a lot of smart people there. It can be very technical. It can be very data driven, but it's also a people business, right? You started this introduction talking about our relationship, not just in terms of whether we do business together or through a friendship. And this business is still relationship business. And I think people who are coming in who are newer think that they could just leverage their quote unquote smarts and their tech wherewithal and then conquer. When in reality, part of what makes I think all of us on this call effective is that we have all those things, but we also know how to talk to people. We don't come into Main Street America saying, "Oh, we're smarter and better than you because we're on the left coast or the right coast and we know how to build technology." I think that's where I think a lot of people miss, and then because of they miss that, what it ultimately means is they often either they over create a product that goes way beyond what folks need and want versus the gradual steps that I think this industry needs. And that ends up answering your second question, which is one of the things I would have told myself is not to be more patient, because I think we were fairly patient, but on some level still to be more patient because of the gradual sort of way in which I think insurance changes. I'm not going to use the word slow or fast, but I do think it's gradual. The industry is so much different now than it was 7 years ago, than it was 3 years ago, than it was 2 years ago. And I think that knowing that and understanding that, I think would have probably made me make certain decisions differently versus trying to do too much too fast.
Who is driving all that change in the industry? Is it coming from the supply side, the markets, the MGAs, the carriers, or is it demand from the agencies and
Yeah.
the larger agents?
I think there are two things, Peter, that's driving it. One, our thesis has always been that the agent drives the business. I don't think that has changed. But what has changed is the distribution side of the house, whether you're a small agency, but certainly medium-sized agencies and large agencies, they are more and more interested in technology solutions to help them. Now, what they're not interested in is give me another screen to add to my other screens. What they are interested in is how do I leverage technology to maximize what I already have, or for it to be part of my flow. And what we're seeing is larger agencies and medium-sized agencies in particular are getting really focused on certain businesses that they really want. They're creating groups that focus in on that, and then they're leveraging technology specific to that use case versus applying one technology across the board, and then it doesn't work for one group or maybe another group. That I think is a big change. The second, and so that's more of a internal driven change. External driven change is the following. People call hard market, soft market, what have you. I don't call it that. I think that the world and insurance has gotten a lot more fragmented, and it is not going to change. And what I mean by that is that larger carriers are doing more and more of the I no longer want to be in a particular state, or I don't want to do a particular type of business, or I don't want these class codes anymore. And so therefore agents who are used to going to certain carriers now have to think about where else do I need to or can I go? And on the other hand, the proliferation of programs, MGAs and the like, I think there's been a 6x increase since I started in the number of MGAs and programs available, which means there's no way an agent knows what markets to go to and when. And so those two things, right, I think have created a really force multiplier for change within the industry, which I think gives folks like us who are thinking about it sort of a lot to work with and to solve.
I didn't realize it was that big of an increase in the number of markets.
Yeah, well, and we see it too. Here's the other thing we see, and you guys probably see this. You'll start to see some of this in your business as well. Over the course of time, the average number of quotes that come back is decreasing. Now, I would say SEMSEE probably has the highest quote percentage there. Now, it's not because we have a better connection to a carrier. It's not because they're doing us a favor and not doing somebody else's favor. It's because in aggregate, because of the number of carriers we have, our percentage is probably the highest. But on a per carrier basis, it's decreased across the industry.
You mean the number of actual quotes coming back
That's
versus
exactly right.
total
That's right.
submissions?
That's right.
Mm.
So
You
if you
think
use,
that's related to just appetite, you think, or whatever
I think it's
criteria?
related to two things. Certainly appetite, but I also think carriers, which is a third level here, but I would put it as high, but maybe like a number two within the carrier challenge is classification. Carriers are getting
Interesting.
much better at trying to get the right classification from the agent and forcing the agent to work harder. And I think two things are happening. Agents are actually submitting less because they're having trouble classification, so they get stuck. And then when they don't get stuck, a good percentage, and we hear this from carriers, of business that gets bound then gets canceled because it got misclassified, therefore putting more pressure on you the next time.
I was
So,
talking with a agent or a carrier this week at an event, and they were going through their book, and they had thousands and thousands of accounts that were for workers' compensation classified as 8810 that were doing all kinds of crazy things, right? Like, and
Right.
agents just pushed it through as 8810 office exposure, and so now they've had to do things like we don't accept just 8810, right? Like you've got to have some other class code that fits into it. But I'm sure that I mean that's an unknown problem in the books of business on the carriers. I'm sure is misclassification.
By the
Oh,
way, I
absolutely.
think we should all go into business and start an MGA, and we should call it 8810 MGA.
yeah. Well, that's kind of surprising because there's a lot more data availability now for the carriers and the MGAs to be able to figure out what a business does. I mean, I've seen uh, certain, technology where you just put a business name and address, and they have all the rating information pulled up from, public sources and private sources. So,
Yeah.
and the AI certainly has a big role to play in that. Here, how long did it take to mention AI on the
Yeah.
podcast? Weird minute, whatever. um,
That was
but
probably a prompt you got from AI to mention AI.
yeah, they can.
Don't forget.
It's telepathic at this point. They just control my brain. I just
That's
watch
right.
so many AI tube videos. But so is it a matter of? I mean, I don't. I imagine the misclassification in the books. It's not any worse. It's just that now it's better understood. Well, before it was like a bigger
Oh,
black
good
box with
question.
a fog.
So it's a really good question. I do think part of it is it's getting caught more. So that is an absolutely a truism because the data from the carriers and because they're just getting smart about it. I think, however, the carriers and because of the fragmentation I mentioned a few minutes ago, the carriers are creating it's not just 8810 or are you a restaurant, but each carrier has then their own codes below that which get really hard to match. And now let me connect that back to AI.
Mm,
That's why we at SEMSEE are using AI to not only help you classify, but then get descriptions and then use the descriptions and AI to then match it to the carrier specific codes. That's where the hang up is, right?
yeah.
It's not just the initial classification, it's then the subclassifications and how each carrier then classifies that business and what that might mean for their rating, which I think is the biggest challenge. I would say the one other thing. Here's what's really interesting, because I always thought it would be interesting to have all the data, as you mentioned, Peter, done up front, and then you're saving the carriers a lot of time and efficiency. Well, because carriers are buying the data, they don't have a way to turn it on and off based on source. So there's this really interesting circle where even if you do a good job for upfront as a rating platform or an AMS to help classify or to help provide information, the carrier is still buying the data, and so there's a disconnect there that I think ultimately is going to have to get fixed from an efficiency perspective.
Interesting. Um,
Kiefer, I want to ask you, or Philippe, I want to ask you a question. Do you think CL rating, commercial lines rating, have we made it there yet? Personal lines rating, and you look at some of the platforms that are there. It's kind of been the standard for a while, and you were a pioneer in commercial lines rating. Adam was a pioneer. I'd like to think I was also on the carrier side. Have we made it there yet as an industry? On a scale of 0 to 100, where 100 being the destination, where are we?
I definitely don't think we're 100. I think that we are probably above 50, certainly now. But I think that when you compare PL rating and CL rating, you're right. PL rating is that's maybe at 80 or 90. When I started 7.5, almost 8 years ago, I bet commercial was in the 20 to 25%. Maybe we're at the 60% range. I think that now, could we ever get to 80 or 90? That's hard for me to answer only because personal lines is a lot less complicated and a lot more data on personal and on individuals than there are on businesses, frankly. Right? And so that makes it, there's that delta will always exist, but I think that you can shrink that delta over the course of time as the data gets richer and richer. But remember, well, not remember, the dynamics of commercial actually, I think, change somewhat faster than the dynamics of a human being, right? And so that also, I think, is part of the challenge, right? A business could be growing every month and adding an employee every month, so you got to keep changing things, or they might deliver one day, not deliver another, right? And so I think there's a lot more dynamic, there's that more dynamic nature to it. What could propel it, and I'll end with this on some level, is there are now so many agents who are mostly personal lines agents, therefore novice commercial lines agents, coming into the fray who are used to personal lines, that it may help be a force multiplier for pushing the commercial lines rating to where personal lines rating is.
Interesting. Now, those numbers, sorry, Keith, real quick, those numbers surprise me. The 50, 60. Are you referring to the number of volume of submissions or the premium bound or
No, I'm thinking just in terms of I think if I understood Michael's question correctly, just in terms of where the industry was, not necessarily based on premium, but just
I see. On the road to being like fully online rating.
That's right.
Okay, yeah. Because I would imagine anecdotal evidence. I don't know if anybody publishes these numbers, but I'm guessing only 10% of actual premium probably gets bound online, commercial.
I think there's a lot, and I think there's a reason people aren't publishing those numbers. Those numbers aren't super impressive yet, right? When you get to, and all partners of ours, but you look at like the Ivans data and things like that. Like I don't think those numbers are super impressive, and so I don't think people are publishing those yet. And if I could add, I mean, Philippe, and you can probably relate to this. I feel like with commercial lines, Michael, to kind of cover your point, it felt like the goalposts kept moving, right? Like, like 8, 9, 10 years ago, it was like, can we present a quote on the glass? And like, as soon as you could do that, the agent was like, well, now I want to be able to bind it, right? It's like, okay. And then as soon as you could bind it, it's like, well, now I need to be able to add in a special endorsement, right? Or now I need to be able to do whatever, right? Like, and then so it felt like in commercial lines, because of the complexity of the product, what equals 100 kept moving farther and farther away, right? And so you're making a lot of progress, but the goal line kept moving at the same time. And so I think that is frustrating in this space.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of goal lines, I don't know if you guys saw, the NFL is getting rid of the 10-yard marker. The analog 10-yard marker is now going to be digital. So
interesting.
So you talk about like changing the goal line. Technology is literally changing the way goal line is measured.
Well, what's funny about that too, and I think there's some relevance in the agency world, is they are going to have two dudes holding those chains just because people like the way it feels. So like they're not using those to actually measure anything, but they're going to be standing out there with the chains just as a prop.
So is the analog for that the insurance underwriter is just going to be the person holding the chains that nobody actually uses?
A little bit. I think they need that security blanket of certain things.
We're probably miles away from that, because even now we submit something online, and then how often does it go to underwriting review? You're right. You expect to quote back, but no, you got to be.
No, it's interesting that the number, and what's interesting is each carrier treats referring what they. So in our system, you can get a quote. You can get a referral with a quote, which often means here's the quote, but then you got to answer some more questions. And in many cases, it's the quote. And then there's a refer where it may or may not quote, and I think a lot of agents treat that as a decline. We're seeing those percentages increase. And I think carriers are using that sort of nomenclature as a way to control their flow even more in their books, which I think is fascinating. So to your point, I think, Michael, around using digital to sort of, or nomenclatures to be able to sort of manage their submission volume a little bit more and a little bit different. But at the same time, y'all, even for newer products and niche products, because we talk to a lot of MGAs, they don't build tech for intake first. They do underwriting first, and then they build tech later. And so I think there will always be a role for underwriting. And I would actually surmise that when I was in the travel industry, how we grew when I was at Travelocity was you had your generic, I want to go wherever I want to go for a wedding or for a business trip or whatever, right? And then you had your top 10 destinations. You can click a button and it does all the work for you of creating a package. But what really grew businesses was niche travel. And I think niche insurance is also going to grow, which actually is going to put the power back more towards the underwriter, but it means a further proliferation of products handled by a small team of underwriters who are not thinking tech enablement and interface first.
You bring up a very interesting point, and again, what I think you're saying is that the scope of this is going to go much wider, where as opposed to going super deep on standard work comp lines of business, you're going to see a lot more E&S specialized stuff. And I always refer to E&S in this industry as like kind of the Wild West.
Absolutely.
And whoever does figure it out, will park their yacht next to Bezos and Zuckerberg's. But talking about technology and AI, and I always like to kind of bifurcate it by size. Right. I know when I was at the carrier, it was like anything under 5,000 within these lines of business should be black box underwritten, and anything above is more complex and is middle market, and I think is further out on the digital, only underwriting. But thinking about, I think one of the rate limiting factors in this industry, like you said, has been the carriers and the markets where they're not exposing their tech digitally, but one of the things that we're doing here, and Peter's kind of all over, is I don't want to call it RPA, but I'll call it the AI version of RPA.
Yeah.
RPA used to be like an ugly word, and
although never to SEMSEE, we loved it from day one.
Say that again.
Not for SEMSEE, we loved RPA from day one.
Yeah, so it's kind of making a comeback. It's like John Travolta. It's like something happened, and all of a sudden he's cool again.
I do love Pulp Fiction. I'm not going to lie.
Well, that's what brought him back.
That's
so
right.
I think AI is bringing RPA back in terms of its cool factor, because now what used to be really difficult to, post and scrape to a third-party website is now relatively easy with some type of AI.
Yes.
Because the rate limiting factor was carriers just most don't have APIs for their product, for binding for sure, rating even most. Do you see that as is that going to have an impact? Is that something that you're investing in, betting on?
We're betting and we're investing, and I'm spending myself a lot of time on it. And what I can tell you is in the next couple of weeks, we're gonna be doing just a lot of experiments with AI that is going to make the agent more intelligent. And one of the things that's a thesis for me and is I want our form to be the best form that ever existed, right? And we're not there yet. But I also know that our form may not be the only way an agent uses SEMSEE to get to a carrier. And that's where I think AI comes in. So we're building different ways to leverage what we know from the carriers and the deep relationships we have with them, the deep understanding of how agents are working or want to work. And we're basically going to create a way for agents to submit, whether it's a form, maybe it's on their phone, maybe it's just through email, maybe it's just an appetite checker that then transforms into a submission. I think that we are going to really see a proliferation of ways in which you can submit through a SEMSEE to the carrier where it's not specifically about the form. The form's never going to go away, and it's the baseline because there's a lot of secret sauce in creating a form to be able to take generic to specific carrier. But then the interfaces will, so that ultimately we're really helping the agent connect to the carriers in however format and way they want. And then the last thing I would say, when I was at Starwood Hotels, we built our SPG website to be based on the individual SPG members' travel experiences, the amount of points that they have, and all sorts of things, so that on some level we had hundreds of different essentially homepages based on who you are.
That's
I
interesting.
see a world in which we can morph into the form into an experience of submitting to a carrier based on me, the agent. Something as silly as when I have a barbershop in front of me, I always ask how many chairs, how many customers, blah, blah, in this order. But another agent may love barbershops too, and they start with, do you use this kind of clipper? Do you use, and so how can we create an experience that's almost unique to the individual, but still gets the information that is needed to get to a carrier?
Well, so that's a good segue. We use the word agents, what kind of agents were you referring to? Insurance or AI agents? And the
Ah,
reason I'm asking this is you kept mentioning form,
yep,
and obviously the form is the interface to human agents. But if you
yep,
think about this, we're actually building an agent in our platform, that AI agent that would quote. So you will basically, instead of the human agent would say to the AI, I just wanted a quote for workers' comp for this lead that just came in.
yep,
Right? Go qualify it, go hit whatever you have to hit, and get me a quote back or a couple of quotes. And what I'm going at is, I don't know if you're familiar, but there's this whole concept of MCP in the way agents will communicate A to A, different protocols coming up online. But I see the world moving quickly in that direction. And we start catering not to human agents but to AI agents that talk to each other. So if my agent can figure out on the internet on the yellow pages of agents that, hey, I can talk to, it looks like there's a company called SEMSEE, they have agents I can talk to, AI agents, and they can get me a bunch of quotes, whether it's, and it doesn't care how you get me the quote, right? So I think that's that's the end goal.
yep.
That will be sort of like the ultimate, arrival there. But we're
Now,
building those agents, and we would love to see on the other side corresponding agents that can deliver those quotes. Yeah.
that makes sense. We have a slightly different take, but I like what you're going in, and I hope you're successful. What we're doing is we're creating agent intelligence to make our agents, who are the human agents, much more intelligent. But
Mm.
then we're also leveraging AI to become their assistant so that they can more effectively do their job by removing the stuff that really is just churn for them, and then they can really be more consultative and they can adjust and things of that nature. And now AI can in some ways do that, but I think that there are limiting factors in commercial, including the fact that there's a firewall between data and what the carrier's appetite, for example, and so that I think will not necessarily go away, and I don't know if AI can overtake that over time. Here's the other thing: let's assume that does happen. Then what that means is you just need one company to do it because they've got access to all the data, and what's going to make any company unique? And I think the insurance agencies and insurance in general has been really good about creating barriers to remain unique.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. And again, I'm not under any illusion that that's going to happen tomorrow,
Mhm.
but even if originally the goal is to prepare that submission for the human to be
Yes,
able to log in where it's like
that
80%
makes
done.
sense.
Yeah.
That's something we're doing. That's something we absolutely agree there for sure. I think that is absolutely the future. The other piece of it that I think is going to be important, and certainly AI could do it, because if it's access to data, but then there's some dangers with that. Is I think that we underestimate in some instances agents want to just get a quote and deliver it, but in other instances there's a lot of consultation that
Mm.
has to happen in that's hard to replace something. It's like when you're buying a house. Maybe it used to be that you need a real estate agent for 90% of what you do, and then as Zillow and Trulia and others came up, maybe you only need them 50% or 70, maybe or 30 or 40%. But the 20% that they provide is incredibly valuable, right?
Yeah.
They
So
know.
if I could add one thing to that, I'm
Yeah,
sorry
yeah,
to pipe in, but we very strongly buy into that. And like I think on every podcast we've had, I end up quoting Jensen Huang, the CEO of NVIDIA, saying, we don't think that AI is going to completely replace humans, but we think humans that use AI will replace humans that don't use AI.
I think that's right.
And, I think what Peter is describing are how do we take these like individual steps of the journey that the agents don't really want to be doing, and how do we take the robot out of the human? And how do we, like, there are certain things like cutting and pasting data or submitting the data or doing research online. I remember going back and having underwriters at the carrier just look up the business, go to their Yelp profile and look at, do they have the word bouncer in it?
Right.
Like, those are things that humans do not have to do and should not be doing. But
I think that's right.
We want to, and our mission is to make sure that the agents spend as much time as humanly possible doing those value-added consultative things that are that human superpower. So right. I'll quote
totally.
we vehemently and violently agree with you on that one.
Yeah, no, we're all in, and we're going to be, and I'm getting personally involved in learning more and working with the team to do that. Taking it out of insurance, one of the things that I'm thinking about, and I don't know if I think I have maybe the youngest kid in this group. I have a 9-year-old daughter, and one of the things I'm thinking about now is teaching her how to actually use AI starting now, not. Because I'm not afraid of it replacing her. She's more of an artist, which is kind of cool and interesting at the same time. But she already knows how to use Google to search for things at this age. Like we were playing a game with her cousins around, give me some clues and tell me what country it is and maybe I'll show you a flag. And she already knew how to like go to Google to try to find some stuff, right? So all I'm saying is, how do I help her, or how do I think about helping her to create the best prompts possible in order to leverage AI, right? So I'm not worried about it replacing her per se, but how do you help her empower? Because I think, to your point, it's about how do you best use the tool in order to then get you to where you need to go.
Well, Peter, last time I was in Salt Lake, we were talking to your son, and I offered him $100 if he can connect his Gmail account to N8N. Do I owe him money?
Much to my chagrin, no. I've been trying. He spent some time, and he realizes the importance of that. Back to Philippe's point, I'm trying to teach him how to build AI agents and automations, and at least understand them because it's coming. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know. But just all between sports and school and stuff like that, it seems to take over the focus of what he's doing, but I'm definitely trying to encourage them and bribe them even a little bit, because it will be an essential skill.
I guess the baseline we've established is like, you raised your kid where $100, it's not motivating him. I know if I told my kid I'd give him $100, he's like, that's what I spend on Uber Eats every day.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, you do. And who I also am bribing to learn. I made the same offer to him, Peter. When I came home, I said the same thing to my son.
Listen, I think technology will take care of itself. I'm back to, like, we just need to be traditional parenting and teach them values, and then we have no idea what AI will take care of. AI skills for people,
Right.
Things is evolving so quickly, but I'm not worried about that.
So, Philippe, I want to. You mentioned a couple of points, and I want to tie them together. And it might sound like a shameless self-promotion, but at the end of the day, like, that's kind of why we're all appearing on podcasts. We want to kind of evangelize, what we spend all this time on. With the concept of that, we all vehemently agree that agents don't want another screen, right? That's like almost this universal truth. And part of the value of being an agency management platform, parentheses, agency management system, is we're the glass, we're the screen. Agents spend 90% plus of their day. And I want to use that to illustrate the partnership here. Because I think at a high level, like, Adam Kiefer, along with you guys are like, OG, commercial lines, raters, pioneers. And at a high level, somebody would look at our rate product and say, well, and this happens all the time when we say we've got a rater and someone says, oh, do you compete with SEMSEE? And we say, not really. Like maybe at a superficial level you could say that, but like we're partners. And you know, absent of a better term, like Peter and I, we don't love the term, but we say like we want to try to be like an aggregator of aggregators, where you're the gold standard. When you talk about commercial lines rating, like SEMSEE is always one of the names that comes up. And I want to use this to like illustrate the fact that what we're building really together is something that we are trying to make the independent agent's life easier, and we are collaborating. And yeah, we maybe have some of the same carrier connections, but this is what you do all day long. And we're tapping into that, and we're conscious of that. And we've got the screen, we've got the user's eyeballs, we've got the engagement, but we're powering that and enhancing that with SEMSEE to be able to have them quote in the AMS and have them get quotes even from the leads that they get. So it's not so much a question, but I just want to kind of point that out, and I'd love your take on that. And because we maybe, again, at a high level, somebody could say we compete, but we don't look at it that way at all. And I'd love your take on that.
Can I jump in there real quick, Philip? Sorry, I know you're the guest, but I just want to quote. It's very important because I don't know most people that may be listening to this understand what the relationship is, and I want to use something Michael said. Like, we're the glass, you're the pipes, at least from our perspective, and that's where the integration and the relationship is. We provide the glass because the data is there, it's easy to click, but then we send it to you, and that's the partnership. So then
that makes
hopefully,
sense. The way to think about it is when I was at Travelocity, what I helped build was Travelocity's $2 billion revenue stream of distribution. And that is private labeling, co-branding, and we use link share, remember those things back in the day, to create small relationships with small travel sites. Go to southcarolina.com or, visit nevada.com, those kinds of things, or, visit Reno, like even microsites, or go to this Uber. And what we did is we white label co-branded because in reality, there is 0% chance that we at SEMSEE, just like we at Travelocity, would get 100% of eyeballs who needed to travel or who are looking to place commercial. We built our platform from day one to be a potential destination as needed, but to be white labelable. And we created it to be a cascading platform so that when we have a partner that's a wholesaler or an aggregator, they can then white label what we've given them and their retail agents. That has been our model, right? Our model is we want to be the empower, and we want to, or power, and be the powering platform for what you want to do, because the reality is you have a great relationship with your agents base. The likelihood of me usurping that is low because we are not an AMS. We're not a CRM. We try to be very good at what we do, and we try to stay away from what we don't. And so what we want to do is empower you to have an even better relationship with your customer. And I think you guys are smart to know, here's also what I don't want to do, because that's not our force multiplier. So therefore, SMC can power it, which again fits within our business model. And ultimately, the agent is better served, right? Now, here's what's interesting. Is there an opportunity where there is some friction because you've got a carrier and I've got a carrier, and which now in reality, they should use your carrier because they're your customer. Because what I'm betting on is the following. We're going to have other products and carriers that you don't have, that you likely will never have, because we have data across an entire platform to know where the holes are and how to get products that fit that hole. That's not your job. Maybe eventually you'll start adding them, but as you add those, other opportunities appear. Right. So yes, on the surface, or for those who are either novice or I'm going to say intellectually limited, they're going to say that we're competitive and therefore, oh my God, how's that going to work? And let me go into my corner and try to win. But for us, part of the charm of SEMSEE is that we are a destination if needed, but we're an empowering platform in many cases. And so it's not just you guys who use us. We've got national carriers, we've got MGAs, we've got large brokers, small brokers, aggregators, networks, and wholesalers all use us in a variety of different ways, again, off of the same platform.
So one thing that I'll mention very quickly is, you talk about like the intellectually limited. It always I always marvel at it where people focus on the 5 to 10% where we do overlap. For me, it's let's focus on the 90% that we don't, and then when we get to that 91%, let's burn that bridge when we get there. But that never ceases to amaze me. But I also think,
by the way, Michael, here's part of why I think we have a really good relationship. You'll tell me, and I'll tell you where we're getting too close to the sun, and then we'll say, okay, we know it now, and then we're moving on, right? Like, I'm not afraid, and you're not afraid, and I don't think anybody's not afraid of saying, yeah, that's a bit close to the sun, let's step away from that, or let's just be mindful of it. And I think that's okay. Whereas I think a lot of people, when they smell potential conflict, they essentially hide and become more sheltered, and I just don't know if that's a great way to do business. I also just don't know if that's a great way to be a human.
Yeah, and for me, like if you told me like someone who's iconic, or to me, Icarus is always something I always love. Trying to fly a little bit too close, but without the wax melting. But I think it's important to note. I'm sorry, Peter's one thing to be super clear in this collaboration, and really one of the first things that we did together was part of the wholesale access. It wasn't necessarily just the pipes. And I think that's important. I want all of our users to know, and I want your customers to know that, you guys have multiple superpowers, but if you already have the appointment and you want the pipes, okay, with us on our glass through SEMSEE, you've got it. But I think what we found is, Philippe, when we launched our rate platform, I think within 90 days, 750 agents signed up for it.
Amazing.
75% of those said, okay, I'm on the rate platform, but I don't have any market access. What do I do? And that's when we called you and said, Philippe, let's get on that. And I want to point that out. And I think that's a value prop that you bring to the table. And I want people to know that that's
good point. Yeah, good point. I was just going to say that the reason actually we got involved with SEMSEE is because another partner had that old thinking about there's too much competition in the space, and they had that mentality and was pushed away. It broke up the relationship, and we're partnering with SEMSEE because you thought exactly the opposite way. How can we? The glass is half full, not half empty, basically.
Yeah.
Adam, you wanted to say something before that?
No, I was just going to kind of add on that. I think my previous life, which I don't know if I'm legally allowed to talk about by name, but
I would not.
I will not. But I mean, I think people always, when you're dealing with Philippe, it was always this, oh, he's competition, and it was like, again, like at 50. But I mean, how many times did we go to dinner at different conventions and things like that, right? I think we were both better for it. Just understanding this is where we don't compete, this is where we do, and even the areas where we were competing, we still had kind of war stories we could share with each other, going like, well, look, we tried it this way and it didn't work, and I was like, oh, cool, we tried it this way and it didn't work, right? Like, and you kind of learn from each other, and so. One of the things I loved about Momentum when I came over here was kind of the shift in attitude of, it's just wide open in terms of, look, we think we can do it. If you think you can do it better, like we're okay with that, right? And we can't do everything great all the time, and if you want to plug in different things, like we can do that and grow all together. So.
And by the way, here's what I love about you guys. Like, I think you're chasing a lot of really cool things, and then some things I'm like, that sounds crazy, but if it works, it's going to be amazing, and that's freaking awesome. That's exciting, right? Because if we're all just trying to hit singles, I think that'll make baseball a little bit better, actually, just versus just trying to hit home runs. But you got to have home run hitters, you got to have singles hitters, you got people who can bunt. Like, I think that's fantastic, and why not? Why the hell not?
Yeah.
We're definitely taking some big swings. I just want to be mindful of time. We did hit the hour mark. I'm sure everybody's. Peter, yeah.
Real quick, in case we have any agents listening, Adam, is there anything on our website and the radar that explains the relationship with SEMSEE, how to get in touch, how the process works? we'll
So
post
it all kind
something.
of runs
Yeah,
right now. It all kind of runs through our Win network. So any of the agents on the platform that are working with Win inside of there are working with SEMSEE, whether they know it or not. And so SEMSEE kind of sits behind some of the things we're doing on Win. And so there's a lot of access
does it
to
cost
SEMSEE.
anything extra to do business
Doesn't
with
cost
SEMSEE
anything
today?
extra.
Okay,
No, doesn't cost anything extra. It's all part of just that market access
okay,
program inside of there.
great. Again, that will be helpful. Anybody's listening, so
Thank you.
we're very appreciative of the partnership. But I'll let Michael wrap it up.
Yeah. So, as we keep doing these podcasts, I keep thinking of like a consistent way to wrap up. And I know one podcaster I like has a bunch of like rapid fire questions. And Philippe, there's like a ton of things I'd love to know. But one quick one final note. Like, if you could snap your fingers and just change one thing about the industry as a whole. I know it's like a very broad question, but just like, I don't know if like whether it would be like, I wish Accord, hit the digital age. I don't know if they're not. It's not an aspersion on Accord. I don't want to get sued. But, you wish Accord could do this, or you wish carriers would all have bind online APIs, or you wish all agents we would conform to one underwriting schema where landscaping and gardeners means the same thing to two different carriers. If you had your wish and you could snap one thing in the commercial lines, quoting, rating, binding, what would you wish for?
I wish the data would just flow. And what I mean by that is, I think data gets stuck in too many different boxes, and then people have to spend too much time and money to access it. And then when they access it, it's a partial amount of data. And all of what you said at the beginning makes a ton of sense, but it won't matter if data can't flow freely and smoothly from CRMs to AMSs to PASs to rating platforms and back and forth. That is my biggest wish for the industry is to let the data flow.
What's the obstacle now? I mean, I have very strong opinions on this, and I talk about it all the time to the point where people are sick about hearing my data fabric, United Nations examples.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. I think in a perfect world, I think every agency or every entity should have their own data lake, and then everybody's a service provider, but then you really control and own your own data and can enrich it over time, and you become much more effective. Because think about it, the reason e-commerce is done so well is they inherently have their own data lakes to enrich all the time and create real engagement with their customer. Insurance agents can engage with their customer, but they're leveraging their charm, which is amazing, but not enough of the data to make their charm that much more powerful.
So, Michael, if I can jump on that, I mean, good news, couple of good news. Well, going back to that analogy, that's what HTTP protocols. So protocols is really the key to that, unlocking the data flow. And HTTP was the protocol that, made the .com boom and the internet take over our lives, basically. I have good news. LLMs, I'm going to stop using AI, but LLMs are really good at reading and interpreting text. And in the end of the day, data is text, right? And I think, going back to my crazy proposition, but this whole thing of agents talking to agents. So, instead of going to an API and figuring out how to get the data, and going to a database and figuring out how to get the data out, there will be an agent in front of that, and then another agent from someplace says LLM agents at this point. Flexible. You don't have to code the entire logic because they can interpret things. Will be able to communicate and get that data. These barriers, these mismatches of the connection will be removed. It'll be almost like a little fuzziness in between, but they'll be able to figure out how to make it flow. So with like MCP and agent-to-agent protocols, I think again protocols, what HTTP was with MCP and A2A protocols, I think we're getting there faster than you would think.
What's interesting though, Peter, is, and I've talked to our head of engineering about this, and this is his struggle, and I sense it from him, is there's a lot of that data is behind a firewall, right? On some level, however, I'm using the word firewall fairly loosely. And part of the fear he has is, for example, even with SEMSEE, is if we open ourselves up to leveraging AI, and now all of a sudden these LLMs have access to all of our data, which on some level is proprietary, but also we have data from other people. That's their data and that's where we're going to have to figure that out. I'm not saying it's not. It's
a great point. A great point. Yeah,
it's a really important thing to think about.
Yeah, the guardrails have to be there, the authentication, the permissions, all that has to be there, and they have certain vulnerabilities
Yes.
have been already exploited. But I think luckily is now we have some of the big players like Google and so forth being behind some of these new protocols that are coming up
That's right.
with
But
the
Philippe,
methodology.
but also to that point, and I'm going to start using terms that are a little bit above my pay grade, but we also have a lot of the AI LLMs and the infrastructure behind our firewall, where we don't have to actually push these things to the public AI, where, you know, and that's a reality too. So Philippe, you know,
Yes.
and I always talk about, and after we're stop recording, I'll tell you my dirty joke about the delta between theoretically and realistically. But theoretically,
Is it as much as the I thou question?
is which question?
Is it as
doubt.
much as the I thou question from Maimonides? But that's different.
By the way, I love the fact that you quote Maimonides. It's one of my favorite. It's one of my favorite things about you. So theoretically, you know, we have this approach. Realistically, we're going to hang up and all go back to our busy days. But theoretically, we are a data lake for close to 2,000 agencies. So, you know, you're throwing down, you know, the glove and the gauntlet. Like when we get back on a podcast, you know, 6 months from now or a year from now, let's not be big talkers. Like we're willing to meet you halfway. And with our agents' permission, we've got tons of agents that will love to see the data flow. So how do we connect from them to us, to you, to the carrier? And don't forget, we've got the Ivan's download coming back to us.
Aha, but that's right. And so here's where it gets really magical. And I actually think we're going to get there, at least Momentum and SEMSEE, is you guys are much more open than others to having the data flow to make it easier for the agent. We already have an API, which I think you're connected to or about to, that actually gives you, so you've got the, let's call it the Ivan's download, which is just bound data. But here's what makes that richer. We can then attach all the other quotes of that same risk that got bound. So you can now have a richer, hey, here's what got bound, but here are the other X number of carriers who were submitted to. Here's their quotes. Here's their coverages. Think that's where it gets really incredible.
Yeah.
Really incredible.
Okay. PCP, I love you, brother.
Love you guys too.
Thank you for the time. Always learn something. I wish we had a call every day. I really do. And I'm inspired and energized. And, you know, Kiefer, let's keep pushing. And to all of the SEMSEE customers are out there, and to all the Momentum customers are out there, like we're working tirelessly to make this better, to make this easier. And you've got some really smart people on both teams here that are executing. So if you don't know what we're talking about, reach out to Philippe. I'm going to post his cell phone number online, and reach out.
We'll respond to text at weird times. I can vouch for that.
And reach out to Kiefer.
If you need any AI development work, his daughter is taking new clients at
That's
$100 an hour.
But if I don't recognize the phone number, don't be weirded out if I answer as Steve, because that's my club name.
All right.
Okay. Well done, boys. Thank
Au
you.
revoir. Good to
Thank
see
you
you,
all.
Philippe.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Insurance Technology Amplified. Be sure to stay connected and up to date by following Momentum AMP on all social networks. For show notes, resources, and details on upcoming episodes, visit our podcast page at momentumamp.com/podcast. We look forward to having you join us next time. Take care and see you soon.